Okay, welcome all. I'm your host Sully. We're doing another deep dive into a beloved cult saga, and I got Future Warfare blogspot. We got William Bregnard. How are you?
I will give you credit. You pronounced my last name right.
I probably got the blog wrong, did I?
No, it's Future War Stories blogspot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My wife actually picked that name.
It's amazing how people just need to study the surname. Just like study it instead of saying how you think it looks like. You just study the word and then say it a lot.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's less than 100 people in the United States by my last name, so I'm very uncommon. So, and we happen to be in the same geographic area of the country.
Yeah, fortunately. Well, we'll meet at a convention soon.
There we go.
Oh yeah, we're into all this warfare. The McQueen Squadron, I call it. Just showing the beloved X-Files writers' short-lived show that has spawned many comics, and well, more like just 2 comics, but either way, one's an adaptation of the pilot, the rest is enhancing it, and we still want more. This many years later, people feel like this world can be built upon.
We got it ended on a cliffhanger.
A guy can only hope for more. It won't ever happen, but god damn it, anything else is possible. This has to be possible somehow. Do another comic book of it, something.
So, rumor I heard while writing the article I wrote on it a couple of years ago, I read that Ronald D. Moore went to Sci-Fi Channel and gave them a couple ideas. And according to rumor, I've never been able to verify it beyond what I was able to verify, was that Ronald D. Moore pitched redoing Space Above Beyond.
That's awesome.
It's very unconfirmed. I read it a few times in a few sites. It's kind of like Michael Biehn being Batman in '89. It's one of these things that exists. That's another thing in the turning.
The meeting happened.
Oh, okay.
Well, I was just going off of that, and but like you say, it'll probably happen years later, which is a shame because you like to think the stuff can get off the ground running, and you just don't know if it's just studio is changing what they're interested in, or scripts collect dust on shelves, and kind of like Blade Runner and Unforgiven, with David Webb Peoples. It's just stuff takes a while to get made to where the right people for it are harder to find.
Yeah.
But yeah, with Expanse and Amazon trying to be the sci-fi horror anthology channel, you would like to think that it'd be even more possible in an age of streaming where people have more patience.
But here's the question I think I'm going to venture.
Yes.
If Space Above and Beyond was going to be remade by somebody who loved it, like Ronald D. Moore, or somebody with talent, somebody with, would you want to have the show we used to, that we loved from 95, 96, which has been a really long time ago? It's okay. It's forever. We'll always love Shane Manson. It doesn't matter. We all love her. So would you want to have the show you had, or the possibility of the show that we might have been able to have if Fox had more balls? And maybe got an ending.
I'd be so damn open at this point, because it wouldn't be the same without the old characters, and at the same time, if I don't know, I know they're rebooting B5 and they got the permission of the creator who's overseeing it, but like you say, it could also turn out awful, like the new 4400, where it's just it has not only nothing to do with the original cult show it was spawned off of, but despite being well intended and having actors who better yet, CSI came back, and I absolutely do not like it. I don't like the new characters. The people who returned were underutilized, and I just don't care about the murders. They're even more bizarre than the original show. So if it gets to a point where not only is it unrecognizable, but really truly just related in name only, then it, I can understand the next Star Trek or the next Twilight Zone. That's one thing. They're telling the same thing and they're doing their own style. But if you got, like you say, you're bringing it back, and it just feels like they just added the name just to get extra funding, then that can just be annoying. It's just well, so what was the point? Really, what was the point? Who were you trying to appeal to? because you didn't appeal to the fan base and you didn't appeal to the genre fans.
Yeah.
So who was it for? Yeah. So
It's
that's, I'm with you. That's where I think it could go wrong if it
Yeah.
just feels like it's just they added a random name. Yeah.
Well, here it is. It's like there have been a. Sorry, forgot to mute my phone. So that's the my text message. Yes, is from Bregnar 2049.
Yes, Blade Runner 2049. If you want to build on the world and then invite all these new and returning characters, I can understand. Yeah.
That's so. The thing is you can get a revival of Space Above and Beyond. It was ahead of its time. It was above and beyond what was going on. I
It
think
really is.
it's interesting because Star Trek. How can I put this? Okay, so because of the age I was when Space Above and Beyond all come out, I was a senior in high school in 1995. I was in there, all that stuff. I always wanted military science fiction. I grew up with anime. I have always been into it. Obviously, I devoted the last almost 20 years of my life to writing and documenting about it. My girlfriend worked at McDonald's at the drive-through, just a side story, and you had a private channel. We could talk to each other.
Sorry, wrong channel. Get back to work.
She was in the Army, and she reminded me a lot of Shane Vanson. And so she was going in the military. And so when Space Above and Beyond, she went to boot camp. And so I watched Space Above and Beyond, and having that character with my girlfriend gone at the time and being in the military was really interesting. And it kind of made me, I watch it today and kind of, obviously I didn't marry her. It's been a really long time ago, but it's interesting to see the show in that context because I did watch it live. The sad thing is, I never saw the end of it. I didn't see the last until I bought the DVD in 2005. Now, I had never ruined the end of the show. So you can imagine watching the end. Spoiler alert, by the way, everyone. And I watched the show and I wept. Like I was an adult male of, God, I don't even remember how old I was in 2005. But anyway, I cried. I sat there and I cried because I didn't know exactly what the ending was. And that's scary. And that's stupid. A show that I love. I never saw the last 4 episodes.
I mean, it's easy to get discommunicated from, I don't know, that's not the right word, but Phil to keep track of various things if, that happens. But I know what you mean. If you're a big enough fan, you can keep trying. But at the same time, I mean, if we didn't have TiVo then back then, guys.
No, and it aired once, and then it was being aired against Sunday Night Football. So it would air, and you would get half the episodes. You would get half of them. I got half of the invasion of Sugar Dirt, the episode Sugar Dirt.
And then you wonder, wait, so what did we just watch?
What did I miss? Like, I saw like Toward, and one of the biggest space battles in the whole show.
A great one. That's how you open up an episode.
There is so much. I still say jalapeno enema to this very day because of that show.
Yeah,
the writing on that show was so amazing. The guy who played James Morrison, who played McQueen.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
His line he gives in The Angriest Angel: "I'm going to go out in the sky in this plane and remove one of his creations out of the sky. So I don't think our maker wants to hear from me right now. And then I'm going to come back and drink a bottle. I'm going to drink a bottle of scotch like it was Chiggy von Richthofen's blood." And then the guy says, "Amen." The chaplain in that's really good. I don't know about the acting, but the chaplain doesn't look scared. I'd be scared to hell if I had to talk to McQueen. And that is one of the most amazing pieces of dialogue ever uttered in a science fiction show. And the way Morrison delivers it is, I mean, it's like Clint Eastwood or something. And I was like, okay, well, that's a wrap, and we're gonna have a great day in this episode. And that clip lives on YouTube, and you'll see people who've never heard of Space Above. I've read comments on like stuff like that, or when Shane gives her eulogy about fall right before the bombing.
Even the scene where they're doing a like practice mission or something. There's just all these earth-shattering, just like you say, just these godsends, these chats that they have that make you go, but not just anyone can write that. Like these writers were already too good for X-Files, or too good for Chris Carter, or too good for their own show, because they care about creating this world and how the characters feel. And I'm sure it had to be a slap on the wrist. Just no one is watching your Dynamite show, which you were spending so much. You're filming in Australia, and Morrison kind of got a boost from it as an actor. That was before he joined other shows like 24 and Twin Peaks and what have you. And it's just like, but what a dynamite like recurring gig, as the supervising commander, and just like you say, Shane Vincent, just so well portrayed by that actress, who was also on Millennium. And
yep, she married Morgan, didn't she? She's Morgan's wife.
I
think they get married.
Oh, let's see. Space.
I think she married Morgan, if I remember correctly.
But yeah, in my mind, she landed safely. It's not easy, but I'm sure, once again, Kristen Cloak is just dynamite actress. So I can only hope that, again, she, Lieutenant West, Lieutenant Hawks, and Damp House, I hope they're all still out there. And Damp House, surprisingly, has not been in as many projects. Joe De La Fuente has been on numerous Netflix shows and is probably better known for being the tech guy on SVU. But yeah, I'm like, these guys need more work. They're dynamite,
Dynamite. The woman who played Winslow.
Yes.
Yeah, she was amazing. The bar scenes in those 2 episodes, The English Angel and Never No More, which is the music, the use of music in Space Above and Beyond is fascinating. Because I'm not into country music, but having Johnny Cash, my favorite episode was Ray Butts. Okay. I just wrote about it for paintball. I'm writing right now an article about force on force training. So the paintball guns used, which I play paintball, I actually wrote all about it. But that episode of Ray Butts is so amazing. And like the dialogue, especially when Shane goes in there and is talking to Ray and she goes,
"We'll return after these messages."
Hello and welcome to Culture Shocked, the pop culture podcast brought to you by 4 aging millennials and our outdated opinions. Join us every Tuesday as we discuss movies, TV, games, and even music, new and old.
Dude, what do you think you're doing?
Are you seriously trying to record a promo without us right now?
Well, yeah?
Dude, you can't just do the promo by yourself. Who's gonna listen to that?
Yeah, and you probably haven't even told them that we're a pop culture podcast where we always agree on everything. For instance, the Sam Raimi trilogy, easily being the best of the Spider-Man movies.
No. But I think we can all agree that Jaws is a classical masterpiece.
Nope, don't like that. But we do all agree that the sequel trilogy of Star Wars is the best in the Skywalker saga, right, guys?
That comment is so ridiculous. I don't even know where to
Anyways, that'll do it from all of us here at Culture Shock. Thanks for listening.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about who would win in a fight between Goku and Superman? Hi, I'm James Gavsey, and on the Who Would Win show, me and my co-host Ray ignore anything important happening in the outside world and debate fictional battles between characters from comics, movies, and video games.
We got a new show every week, and almost always am I the winner.
Yeah, not true, Ray.
In the past, we've discussed such matches as Captain America versus Darth Vader, Solid Snake versus the Iron Giant, classic matchups like RoboCop versus Terminator, and even the Muppets versus Sesame Street.
That one was crazy. So if you're a fan of geek culture and love a spirited debate, check out the Who Would Win show wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out at whowouldwinshow.com.
We let things pile up in the DVR. We add them to our queues. We wait for the DVDs and Blu-rays. We time shift. The Time Shifters Podcast. Sci-fi, horror, fantasy, superheroes, comedy, action, film, television, maybe some not-so-current events. Find us on iTunes or at timeshifterspodcast.com.
Cool thing about Blind Knowledge is we are in multiple countries. We are worldwide all across the globe. We are in the US, we are in the UK, we are in Canada, Germany, India, Japan. We're in Australia, y'all. BlindKnowledge.com. Now back to the feature presentation.
She goes, let me ask you something. You ever killed a man? She goes, what do you think about in the dark? He goes, I think about the first man I ever killed. What do you think about him? What if he got the better end of the deal? I'm like, my God, like you said, who writes that? And those actors deliver it. And you're like, and he's sitting there drinking to Johnny Cash. And I was like, my God, this is, and then people love right now to talk about DS9. Okay. And I get it.
Yes.
I get it. But you want to talk about the Dominion War, and then you want to talk about the Chig War, and you want to talk about how, Star Trek got all earthy, and I have my issues with the Dominion War, how it was shot, and so does Ronald D. Moore. But my God, you look at Space Above and Beyond, and it is so, especially episode where they almost have no dialogue, where they go to Tigris and Hawks is having all those flashbacks. There's almost no dialogue in that.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the show, like you said, you have these brilliant people writing, creating, filming, and juicing the most out of this like early CGI effect with the the Hammerhead, the Endo-Exo fighter, and the Chig bomber sequence when the Saratoga's under attack. All that shit is so phenomenal, and no one watched the show. I was the only one of my little group of geeks that watched it. It's okay, we were. No one watched the show except for me, and I would go spouting about it to whoever would listen to me in 1995, 1996, in the primitive days. And the show even had like CGI stuff. You could like go around the SCV and all that stuff. And I was into all that stuff. I mean, hell, that's the year that 96 was the year that the Aliens Technical Manual, Colonial Marine Technical Manual came out, which I still have my original 96 copy. I will die with that thing in my hands. That thing is brilliant. Brilliant. And so you get the show that is so visceral and kinetic and dynamic, and no one watches it. And they're tuning into Voyager. No respect, no disrespect, but my God.
Yeah.
Trek is always pretty... when I talk about it.
No, it's true. Trek is pretty rusty in its first year. All the shows. I mean,
all of them.
And it's just always a shame because you never know how, again, just people communicating or not. And again, Space had only 1 year and it's already leaving an impression. I mean, I had other pals on and they're like, there's some episodes that seem like they're out of airing order, but either way, I still got to tip my hat to them for even bringing some of the best talents of all time. I mean, they even got Weinrich Colby to helm 2 episodes and he's worked on all the tracks. But to your earlier point, yeah, it's like that they only had 1 year on the air and they made the most of all their resources. So it did almost always make me secretly wish that these X-File writers could have teamed up with the track writers because they're all good writers. And unfortunately back then, much like critics would poo-poo anything action or horror related, they would sci-fi was definitely both a thing that people wanted to be a part of and then actors would hate being a part of because then they couldn't get out of that role. They would try and do serious stuff and people want to see them, shove a lightsaber in someone's face. And it's like, well, I'm past that.
Yeah. And that's the horror of like,
that's why Ensign Rowe actress Michelle Forbes, kind of got out of it. She's had a very diverse career, but she was just afraid that's the only thing I'm going to be able to do. So that's why she's come back now as Ensign Rowe. It's just like, well, it is one of my best roles. It's just I had to get out of it then and turn down the DS9 offer because then I wouldn't get to do all these other great shows like Battlestar 24 and Homicide.
Her as Kane, I'll never forget when the Pegasus showed up in that damn thing, and I got to see her, and I was like, "Oh, it's Ensign Rowe. We're in for some good stuff now. It's supposed to be real, y'all." Still, I'll never forget when the Pegasus went back to rescue the Galactica, and I cried during that episode, and it was the most badass scene of all time. I'm like, "Yeah, space combat!" I own just very day. I own an Eagle Moss Galactica. It sits on my desk where I play Destiny.
Do you really? Nice.
I bought it for the company where I'm business, and I love it. I'm wanting to get an Akira class. Akira class is one of my favorite Star Trek Federation starships because it's badass, because it's got balls. It's a torpedo boat, and it was meant to kill Borg. And the Akira class is amazing. The Thunderchild, and
it really is.
Waiting to get one. I'm going to put next to my Voyager. I have a 95 Playmates Voyager. But anyway, and I just want Eagle Moss to make me an SA-43 Hammerhead so I can have one of my dads.
And to your point, I mean, I like how they made some of the newer ships on Picard look like the Akira class on the original both Enterprise and First Contact ships. But it's interesting too how, like you say, is like the Enterprise one at from Archer's time is interesting because, you know, you have to remind people, hey, these guys didn't have any ability to beam anyone up back then. They didn't have any of this or that. That's why it's interesting. It's a bare bones ship.
In XO1. And there were 5 of them. Supposedly going to be 5 of them. And I actually wrote about that class. And in XO1, I loved Enterprise, and I wept. I cry a lot apparently watching sci-fi.
Because they make the thing feel more real than it actually is, and people don't get that. They think, "Oh, boo-hoo," you know, you're watching something silly, and it's like, well, here's the difference between Star Trek and Star Wars, and you know, all these other ones like Expanse, B5, and Space Above and Beyond. Like, it's more than just good camera work, actors giving it their all, solid set design, inspired shots by the directors. You know, it's like to have these guys again really dive into just themes and being strategic with where they reveal it. Is like, here, we'll begin this with action versus begin it with drama or mystery. Is like that's something. And it really is a cyberpunk show. I mean, when they first reveal all these sentients, they're captured by them, they don't know why they're being hunted by them. That was dynamite for this show, because then we actually got to more than just, hey, the enemy's kind of on scene. We also know that there's more to it. It really does, much like Cancer Man on X-Files and the other mysterious guys on Millennium, is just shows how these guys own it. When they come up with their own conspiracy, they come up with their own nefarious plot, and they do more than that. They also show how now these characters are ready for the inevitable. They're ready for the long fight. And that is reassuring. And you need that in a good drama, because so many other dramas kind of focus on there is no hope. And that just gets a little annoying and boring after a while. It's like, well, then why are they even fighting? You know?
Yeah, I remember talking about B5. I remember when the episode where Clark's government comes to take back.
Yeah, you're like, who are these bureaucrats? Because they're not just any bureaucrats. And what the hell? They just handed him a gun. Then they're asking him to assassinate someone. Well, what the hell is going on here?
That show was like, I remember when that show, it's so amazing, that 90s period, and you got Stargate later on and all that. And it was amazing that kind of like this, Space Above and Beyond was a show that kind of got lost in some of that. Because you had Hercules, then later you had Andromeda, Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda, which is its own little thing. One of these days they're going to actually
syndicated.
God, there's only like 2 good episodes of that show that are like really amazing. The one with the Magog board the Andromeda and the guy who plays Tyr is so amazing, that scene. Sorry, I'll go on.
It's a good point. There's some pros and cons with some of those other ones, but yeah, I would love to do an Earth Final Conflict and Andromeda episode, because it is interesting how Robert Hewitt Wolf comes over from DS9 and becomes the showrunner of that one.
God, I totally forgot about Earth.
Much like B5, it's interesting how they're doing a lot of the same stuff, but they're using a different style. It's pretty well remastered on all the Plex and Tubi stations. I don't think sometimes the music seems to play a little louder in some scenes, and I don't know if it's a remaster issue, but either way, I digress. That's a good point. Andromeda is interesting in that it kind of tries to take some of the same stuff as DS9, B5, and Space, and kind of form a vision regarding just what these guys do in their downtime, and then when they got an actual space battle, is like, do they act like an actual, what we would know as a real life war, or is it like Star Wars where it's more fantasy? But yeah, they don't go the Star Wars route. They go more, what these guys are doing here is like they really want to make it look like an actual war show, but it's, you know, set in the future. And kudos to them for pulling it off, because the episode where they got to deal with the tank, and the tank pilot is being just total horse's ass, just distracting them, being a loudmouth, and like, guys, just give us a moment here. You know, we're trying to get used to being in this damn thing.
A line that show when Hawks is trying to feed Manson. Oh, look, Oh, Hans, that smells like a, like a shrapnel. And she must be feeling better. She's starting to bitch. I still use that line this very day. That episode I covered in when I talked about the Steyer Hog, which makes an appearance in Mechanic's Hand. It shows you that, right, about all that. That episode with the actor who plays the main syndicate, who tortured Wang, and I can't remember the actor's name. He is so good. He goes, and when he tortures Wang, and then later he sees him, and then McQueen tortures him, and he gets a butterfly knife, and he goes, "Where is he? You're war." And he hits him on the head. He goes, "Criminal." And he goes, he goes, "I don't have any problem going all the way with this." I mean, that scene.
God. Yeah.
God, and I'll never. He goes, "Leave the room, Wang," and he gets out the knife. I'm like, "Oh, shit's about to get real." Jack Bauer, before Jack Bauer, we just didn't know. And he's pulling out stuff out of him.
You don't know if he's going to be an anti-hero or commit an actual war crime. You don't know until it happens, but it's a good warm-up because you're just like, okay, whoa.
McQueen was not. That episode to me is one of the finest moments of science fiction because the actor and the references to the Odyssey, which I actually looked up, and then the music.
So much of the Iliad in this, it's insane.
Yeah, and he talks about the line is actually because I've looked up the line in the actual thing and they kind of took pieces, but that's a strange thing about Space Above and Beyond. There's so much in it. I took so much, like for instance, Wang quotes from Shakespeare when they're on board the Christmas episode. That episode is so deep, and I've never quite figured out what's going on in it, and I don't want to know. Do you know the first of that when they talk about the Christmas truce during the First World War? And they've got the Nutcracker music playing over it. I used to show that in my history class when I was a teacher.
Oh, really?
Show that scene just up to where the Chigs attack because I would cut it. But I would talk about that intro about the Christmas truce was a thing I used to talk about in my world history class, and when I was a teacher, and I would show that scene, and the kids were like, "Where is it from?" I said, "When you're older, And that's just the power of a show like that, and. The pilot's kind of a little bit goofy.
The usual. They were still in Top Gun mode at that first part where they're like, "I want to join. Oh my God, everyone's dying around me. I guess I'll join anyway."
Yeah. Oh, by the way, it's 100 years later, but we're still flying FA-18, and then you get the actor, the drill sergeant character.
It's aged pretty well, other than the scenes where they have their boom boxes out. That's the part which loses me. I'm like, this is 2063. I'm sorry, guys. Come on.
My favorite is.
I know they didn't know, but still, I wouldn't have been that on the mouth just showing that much pop culture.
When Hobbs get the CD and it's what?
Yeah, that's what it is. The CD
Dark Side of the Sun, where Shane talks about being young, and they have the episode. Yeah, at the Boonwell, the H3 mining facility. God, I've seen these episodes a lot. And he plays X. He plays the band X, which Viggo Mortensen, I think his wife was in it, or he was in it, the actor. And episode, and I remember playing that song. I hadn't heard that song in years when I saw the episode originally in 96, 95, and I was like, oh my God, that's X, That's that show, like the nuggets in that show that were so good. And you're like, how did this show exist? And even today, for this, I watched just pieces of it, and I'm like,
exactly.
God.
And for them to go that drastic, just have all this other stuff, and then when so much other stuff got poo-pooed, like, oh, you can't show this or that, and then they get away with this or that, and I am liking the contrast you're saying. Jack Bauer, because like it showed you, it does a better job of showing the gray of war. Is like. And especially here is like, what would happen if, much like B5, you don't trust the people, the world powers that be there. You don't trust half the orders. You don't trust some of the other, kind of like Section 31 on Star Trek. You got all these CIA equivalent guys who keep coming in and want to do their own agenda. You're like, whoa.
Night
kill.
Watch.
But these guys look innocent. You want us to do a massacre? Won't do it. And I love that scene where McQueen, Morrison, again, steals the show, literally. But I mean,
literally,
he's so dynamite. When he's questioned, they got a signed question by the government guys, just making sure, hey, and then what do they call the non-humans that or the humans who were born differently, who they consider bastards. Not still the kids. They consider them. What's the name? Anyway, they basically mind probe him, and it's just interesting how McQueen is stalling for time. He knows everyone else is on an away team mission, and then they truly do ask him a gray question, and he's like, I really don't know how to answer it. Please ask a different question. And they totally hard nose him. They're like, nah, this is the only question that's being asked. You don't get to ask. And he's like, well, then I guess I'm stalling.
Yeah, then Tucker Smallwood's character, the chief of the boat, the Saratoga, comes in. He goes, "This man has died and is killed for me, and I would die for him." The episode I remember when they go and bomb, and McQueen asks to go with him on the mission, and he reads that coup poem, and they cut the fingernails and all that. Fantastic episode and real history in there. But I'll never forget when Tucker Smallwood asks McQueen. He goes, "You would do this for us?" And he hands him the pick. And interestingly enough, here is an African American actor, right? Who his family is from the South in the thing, right? And you have this thing, and he's asking like another slave population, right? And he says, "You would do this for me." And then there's a subtext in there that was written. I later read it was written in, because the in vitros were used as labor during the in the Infertile Fight, and like that discussion goes, "What we've done to your people." I thought, my God, that scene done any other way. And I got the subtext at the time when I watched it. I rewatched that scene. I was like, my God. He goes, "You would do this for me." And then, of course, then later he goes, "I'll be a son of a bitch if I go to your funeral time." He goes, "You will, sir, but we'll talk about your mother when I get back." And I was like, God. And, they cover addiction. The guy who plays Hawks, was really was a model before. The woman who plays Vance, and I remember when her boyfriend breaks up with her, and she goes blind, and she goes, "I wanted to last." And she was one of the more, of course, she was in TNG. She was a helmsman in TNG, and her character is really interesting. I'll never, and Wayne's character, the guy who plays Wayne, he has some stuff in there, especially when he gets tortured, and he talks about. And I'm not much for baseball. Okay, sorry, I'm not much for baseball. But when he's talking about baseball, I still remember some of that. He goes, "Oh, that would be. Don't tell me." And he's talking about, "Remember who you are." And God, there's actually speaking. We were talking about in an Internet Movie Fire name base when they're they're using they're using MP5s, right? When they're prison break on and they're shooting it, they go semi-auto, and they're like, "Well, there's conserving ammo." I'm like, that's brilliant.
Whoa. Yeah.
What?
Right.
And I don't know. There's stuff in there, and so I thought about this line the other day. We should cover. So a lot of science fiction shows will have pilots be soldiers, be ground pounders, infantry, Marines, whatever.
Right.
Space Marines. So they do it the show because all the special effects were expensive. They needed to show the ground combat to get that element of the war story done because it's visceral. The
Get
flight
your attention. Yeah.
Yes. So then, so many people wrote in about it that they put a line in one of the episodes like, "I'm getting an earful of bitching and moaning about Zoomies being deployed as ground pounders. You are," he goes, "how needed? When needed," And I was like, God, that's brilliant. That's like, that's almost him talking to the camera, the writers going.
It kind of is, yeah.
I think it was what I read once that they had gotten it. And like, you wouldn't deploy pilots that's worth several $1 million in training. They're Marine Corps pilots, right? That are trained, every Marine's a rifleman today.
Everywhere,
but
yeah.
You wouldn't deploy an FAA team pilot to go, in an amphibious landing maneuver, right? No. Totally different skill set.
Suicide, yeah.
Exactly. But it's funny how they do that in Space Above and Beyond. I was like, because I thought about that too as a kid, because I was a weird kid, and I was like, oh yeah. The cool thing, I know I'm kind of riffing here because the show's
it's
so
fine.
amazing.
We're all circulating.
Huh?
It's all good. We're circulating around.
The SA-43 Hammerhead, Nendo XO combat fighter, is really cool because it lands. It's a helium-3 powered rocket sled, basically the bottom of it, and they would have those canopies to send. I don't know where they got the idea for that, and it's brilliant. And I'm like, I've never been able to like, no one does that. And I'm like, my God, even Battlestar Galactica and the other, even though, and I was like, God, I was rewatching it recently, going, at the time I didn't really question, but today I'm like, God, that's a brilliant idea. I don't know how that ever came about.
I'm sure they left him alone. They were always Fox was going to leave him alone because they've already done 2 hit shows for him. But at the same time, it did make you wonder. I think in a better world, they should have just totally left X-Files at that point. They should have just, and I hate to say this because I don't want to play with fire. All 3 shows are fantastic, but I think they should have just dedicated more time instead of, they kind of had left, but at that time, it almost made me wonder, had it been a bigger hit, had Chris Carter just repaid him and literally just put his name on it,
Yeah.
Because they kept saying from the guys who brought you the X-Files, but it just wasn't enough. It just, however it got scheduled, no one showed up. And it's like, the hell, guys.
And I was part of this community at the time, and this is really early internet.
There was GeoCities, everything. Yeah.
Yeah. You would log in on Netscape that you could still watch the first Mission Impossible movie and see. I had to go to I was going to a junior college at the time, and I had to go, and I went on the message board because back then I went on and wanted to talk about space above and beyond. Because
come on in whenever you want. Yeah.
Oh God.
There was a place for everything back then. People forget.
Yeah, it was actually the show *Halt and Catch Fire* that taught me how early the internet really was. I didn't, with Lee Pace, I didn't know that before. I grew up in the '80s and I didn't know that. But it was interesting, who, like you said, no one showed up. The ratings were bad. I've even looked at them later, and it's like, but yet here we are talking about the show, and clearly we have a passion for it. And I'm getting all riled up about a show that ended in 1996. That is 2 years before I met.
We're dragging it out of the past, guys. It's just because they did everything right.
Everything.
It looked like a movie of the week. It was much like how all the crime shows were coming out at this point. This was before CSI, but there was always rivals like NYPD Blue, Homicide, Law and Order. And X-Files, same deal. It's kind of a procedural, and it's also a creature feature of the week sometimes. So it's just like, and here it is. It's doing everything. It's showing a futuristic government, much like B5. It's got something for the track cast where they have mumbo jumbo, and then they burst out of the formulaicness and they do their own storyline. People like it. They have the budget, the great various characters. It all shows, and yet it just wasn't enough. And it's just like, much like Battlestar showed, you could have these characters be like the ones in something like Aliens or Escape from New York, and then you could have them be like in a regular war movie like Platoon or Casualties of War, showing how war crimes and other crap that no one wants to deal with still isn't going away. It is war, so it's going to happen in any kind of future. And I am convinced that Adam Goldberg definitely got to be the medic in Private Ryan because of that tank episode. You can't convince me otherwise. Someone must have campaigned saying, "Hey, he's done a war movie.
He's done a war. Yeah,
look at this episode.
War, yeah.
You can ride your tank." You can...
God, I forgot about that.
It does make you wonder, though.
What's that?
On? It makes you wonder what was going on.
What was going on?
Everyone had to pass on this after a while.
It was the chicks are another good point you raised about the movie. Which I remember the chicks, and you wanted to see what was underneath, and they saved that for a long time. I think one of the big mistakes of Space Above and Beyond, okay, I'll say this because we've been praising the show and kind of really getting our hands and knees worshiping it. The thing they did wrong, one of the things, there was an episode at the very end.
Everything slips, guys. It happens.
Right.
Yeah.
That after they got to where they had as AeroCorps, what's the name of the company? Because later Frank Black's wife works for them, and they're like a Nazi Odessa group. Remember, in Millennium, they made a reference to AeroCorps, Aerotech. It's Aerotech.
Yeah, I have your blog and a few other people have brought that up, and I did wonder if they just reused the name or if it was meant to be the same. But yeah,
that was a wink, wink. That episode, the one where Frank Black's wife works for the neo-Nazis, they got paintings of Hitler in the waiting room, was a wink, wink, nudge, nudge to to that because they were doing Millennium and they came back from Millennium. And of course, they got a few actors from Millennium on the show. But I'll never forget. They got this actor later was very famous in Seinfeld. He played Elaine's boss or something. Remember? He's a great actor, but he's bad as a CEO because the guy they got to play Sewell, the head, the slimy hair, the head of Aerotech, that got their Telos mission compartmentalized. He's a brilliant actor. Like, I'll never forget. He goes, "Tell me what I want to know." He goes, "I'm the farthest man from," who later that actor, French, got to be one of the characters on Third Rock from the Sun. He was a brilliant actor, and it was great.
French Stewart,
Yeah, there you go. "I'm the farthest man from home. They can go home. They can go, but I have to stay." And I'm like, my God, this acting is just, I'll never forget that episode because, you see the pilot. Pilot's what it is. Then you get these, I think they were supposed to be Green Berets in the show. They land, they move out, and like they're looking at the wreckage of one of the colonial cutters. And then they find the actor. They get him up, and the chase go over front, and they move out, and the guy's screaming, and then the door slams the ISCV. And then it goes with the credits, and I was like, I saw that episode live. I was like, holy crap, that was. I didn't smoke, but I probably would have started that. That was that good because it's a brilliant. Because none of the actors are on there. You've got them in those really cool NVGs that they used.
Yeah,
really cool. And because I had to find out like their gear. Like I've gone into like what was the little thing on their side. I had to get into all that. I had to. Couple people at the prop. I had them scanned so the picture is pretty close up, but it was astonishing that the second episode is that good with the survivors and the Tellus, and then his girlfriend Kylan Selena. God, I'm having like fire all these neurons again, and God, I'll never forget the guy who played Sewell was so good. But then they get this other actor in. And it's like it was a total different theme. And then, you get the ambassador from the Chicks that come. And that was really creepy the way their voice sounded in the machine. And I thought, I knew they were canceled then. Kind of like Enterprise where they rushed through it. I think they had to. But the actor they played, I thought, he's not right for whoever this guy was supposed to be written as. Because I think he was supposed to be kind of creepy. And he doesn't come off as creepy.
I'm vaguely remembering. I think the actor didn't get the full gist of where it was going, and you kind of do wish the filmmakers could have given kind of like on certain X-Files when a side character shows up to reveal another character who will become a bigger part of the franchise. It makes me wonder if that was a lesson for them. Is just like, okay, not everyone understood what was going on. You got to but then again, kudos to them for even keeping any of this stuff up and running, because it also makes you wonder, like, how did anyone do a hell of a job back then, other than just be told by your boss, okay, great, can clock out now. You didn't have anything other than hearing about it years later at a convention. You didn't have, even the internet wasn't instant. People don't realize, but it makes me wonder how, and then, when Twitter would start invading a live TV broadcast in the late 2000s, early 2010s, and they started getting feedback before it happened, it also made you wonder, like, how does a writer's room even transform nowadays?
Yeah, because it's not long. I mean, you figure, okay, so one of the great resources that Future War Stories does use is Starlog Magazine, which was a big thing when I was a kid. You go to a bookstore, you read it, you have descriptions. Starlog Magazine was the geek's reference, and today it's one of the most fascinating primary source documents I can use. There's a site that uploaded all of them, and I scan them. I wrote an article 4 years ago. I wrote about what George Lucas may have known about the prequels before, and that took me a year. I researched for a year. I used every bit of my background in history. I've written lots of historical research articles. I've won awards for it, not to be. So I applied all that and applied it to the single question of what did George Lucas know before? And I wrote that article. I was going to turn it into originally a video, and I never did because, time, kids, all the stuff I've got going on. And I use Starlog Magazine for primary course. They have, and I've gone back and read them on Space Above and Beyond. And you can see in the critiques, the fan mail sections in the magazine that were printed back when we used to do that.
Yeah, Mr. Science Theater wasn't the only guys doing it.
Right. And you would see like fans go, I love this about Space Above and Beyond. or you would like read the back of old comic books, and you would get people that would write in. And it was interesting because, like you said, there was no feedback. So the feedback would be several months. And the Space Above and Beyond, I mean, they were getting fan mail after the show was canceled. And I remember reading that Sci-Fi Channel thought about restarting it back when Sci-Fi Channel was still Sci-Fi, not the Wise that they use now. Yeah.
That's crazy, though, because, like, I would see it, like, come on during the middle of the afternoon, and I would never be up enough to see the credits, but I was just like, well, what is this show? It's not like any of the other shows, which is this, it just would always, just like in the middle of the afternoon, they just do a marathon out of the blue, and you're like, what is this? This is interesting.
And it's interesting you said something very profound there.
I think as far back as 04, 05, yeah, I would just see it, I'm like, what is this?
What is this? Because you said something, it's very different. It doesn't look like it does look like, if you, like you said, it looks like
you think you're watching a movie and like from Lionsgate or Universal, and you're like, no, it's not one of the other movies they often air on there. It's something else.
It's something else. I remember when Nathan's Brother dies. Toy Soldiers, name of the episode. They quote a lot from Stephen Crane, who wrote the Red Badge of Courage. They do a lot of quotes from that, and that's how brainy that show is. And I remember just how in pain the actors can be and what they could do. And just by the way they cock their gun, put their gear on, you're like, damn. When Shane...
I think Dell died. Didn't he help, other than appear in one episode?
Yeah, he appeared in the pilot, and then
he did what he did on all the war movies he's been on, like Platoon and Private Ryan, and even Falling Skies. He like, in exchange, they allow him to play someone. It's only fair.
Exactly. I'll never forget. I remember one thing I was really fascinated with that show that's still in, because it's a brilliant design, and I spend a lot of time, anyone who reads Future War Stories knows I spend a lot of time on minutia. We were talking before we started filming that I spent, months trying to research what the scope was on top of Kyle Reese's plasma rifle.
Yes, it was an off-air chat, guys, but it's very fascinating.
Like, what is this? And Yoel and I were like, we're going to research it. But it was amazing to me, the design of the IFCV, the cargo ship they use, and the modules that would come down and come up.
Yes.
And there's a lot of modulability that I always wanted a technical manual, because some of the artists that worked on it have blueprints, and we've got.
They can answer questions that no one can possibly fulfill in 45 minutes,
And that's the thing. It's like when I wrote that article on the M590, no one has ever written an article about it. No one.
Exactly, dude. I would do it with even select Star Trek ships that were fan favorites, but were like one-off episodes, as well as the last two Next Gen movies. And I was like, just give me a number, pull it out of your ass, just say something. There's someone on that ship. It's not just 20 people on screen. It's going to be 150.
I need to know why the ship can fire all these torpedoes at once. I need to know what it is.
We like specifics, and Orville will do it. They love playing around with stuff like that. They'll say 800 on board. I've just been destroyed. Oh shit! Just got real. Don't pull a George Lucas where you hire people who, know every you pick their brain and literally like digitally put your mind into their mind, so now they can answer every question at a drop of a coin.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've read once that there are a lot of sci-fi shows that were never developed for people that would get that into it. Like the original series of Star Trek was never developed for people.
Even B5, like J. Michael Straczynski all the time would be asked like this and that, and he'd be like, as many as the plot desires. He's an old school writer, and it's like, and then it's like they would do RPGs, and he would be like, that's non-canon. I'm like, well, it's Warner Brothers signed off on it. You might not like it because you weren't asked to be a part of it, but at least they gave us specs on how many air conditioning cafes are on this place, and again, how many people are on the ship. That's what we ultimately want to know. They're 50, 800. What?
I mean, in fact, so being an old school roleplay gamer, I played a lot of the Star Trek combat game that was out by the Chicago company. I always mispronounce it. It's FASA that did City Tech.
Oh, totally. There was even like a 2006 one, I think, for one of those handheld places. But yeah, it was like that. RPGs are still a thing in the track community.
And it was so, they got really angry. Gene Roddenberry never wanted a war story in track. And I've kind of talked a lot about Star Trek, the Federation, and their kind of military science fictionists.
Mhm.
But it's interesting how them putting several things into that role-playing game canceled their contract for Next Generation because Roddenberry's like, I don't want all this military stuff. What are you talking about? Starfleet Marines, they don't exist.
That was around when he was losing his mind, and
he was losing his mind.
he became less progressive all of a sudden, and people in the writers' room would hear him use some slurs like, "Whoa, what the hell, Gene? You're about loving, and you just told me an hour ago you like my script. Now you're telling me you hate it. What the hell?"
Yeah, what is that? There's a really great documentary on that.
I forget the name of the documentary, but like I read part 2 of the 50-year journey book, and that filled in so much about the casting and everything. And
man,
some of it you hear on all the other podcasts, but really, if anyone's going to look at these, look at some of those trivia books and have fun with them, because they really are insightful. The earlier ones, not as much, because they're just kind of recapping an episode and giving their thoughts. But like if you were fortunate enough to see some of these other things, it's like, see, these guys did more than just speak with these people, copy off their IMDb info. It's like they were covering what was going on behind the scenes, and it really is something that just can't even be captured today. Like, I can't think of anything else other than that isn't made in Canada nowadays that was instantly syndicated. Other than this in Highlander, I can't think of anything else where it's like they knew what they wanted, they brought it to life, and they were on every other channel every other week.
Yeah. We said Canada always reminds me of watching Highlander, the series, and Stargate. And it's like, I went to Vancouver, 91?
It's very dreamy, right?
Right. And you're like, okay, apparently every planet in Stargate looks like Canada or the X-Files, because so the X-Files occasionally takes place in real places. So I'm going back and rewatching
Dead Zone and Twin Peaks. Yeah.
And you're like, wait a minute. Okay, so true story. Speaking of weird little trivia. Okay, so I've traveled around the United States at one point in my life. By 2017, I traveled around.
I'm glad you could do that.
It was very strange. So McQueen's wife is from a little town in Pennsylvania called Wilkes-Barre. I flew into Wilkes-Barre one time for a job. And of course, I'm like, I just remember that because it's in The Angriest Angel. He goes, is that your wife? And he goes, she's on my mind a bit. She was in a small town in Pennsylvania called Wilkes-Barre. So, I'm like, But then one day when I got my travel papers, and they're like, hey, you're going to fly to this airport in Wilkes-Barre, and you're going to pick up the car and all that. I'm like, wait a minute, Wilkes-Barre? I know where that is. And I'm like, no one else at the time, because I made this, like, it was in a sci-fi show I watched as a kid, and they're like, I don't care. Go pick up the car, go open the clinic, have a nice day, get out. And no one got the joke. And you're in that little fan moment, like, ooh,
It seems like it's pretty common, because I know Leslie Hope, Terry Bauer from 24, she's been on everything else like Revolution and NCIS, and she's directed plenty of episodes of Star Trek Discovery, SVU, and Lost in Space. And she, back when 20 years ago, she wanted to be a director, and she was still having to act, play, disgruntled mother or non-approving bureaucrat or love interest. And she would notice that even Canadians, like Canucks, would mock each other. It's like they accepted, we always look cheap or have a bad track record. It's like, what? Why even be Canadian? Why go there? Why not be proud of who you are? It's stupid.
It's so funny.
So, but that is wild. You tell certain people, and then you see that look upon your face. It's like, I've just walked into the most non-geeky person ever. How do I get myself out of this awkward situation?
Oh, I'll tell you a funny little story. Okay, so I used to teach school. I used to be a history teacher.
Glad you did a good service.
Yeah, I tried.
I respect all teachers.
It was a little bit geeky. They did get 20. They did do some dice rolling and role playing games I built for history. They did all that. So I taught kids from all around the world for 4th ISD. So I taught refugee kids, and so I had this assistant principal my second year teaching. He was asking me, he said, do you speak any other language? My standard response is I speak English and bad English, right? That's my standard sci-fi response. And then I said, I made a joke. And I said,
speak a little Klingon and Vulcan.
I did. I said, I speak a little Klingon. And he's like, well, what country do they speak Klingon in, and where did you learn? I'm like, uh-oh, oops. And I'm like, how do I get out of this? Because obviously he's not getting the joke. The guy, my sister principal, is from Africa originally. So he probably had no idea what I was, he didn't watch Star Trek. He wasn't a geek. He didn't get any of it. So when I was speaking Klingon, right, and my kids spoke 6, 7 languages each, my students, where they were from, especially my kids from Myanmar and parts of Africa, they spoke a lot of language. And so he's like going on, I'm like, oh, I got a meeting, I gotta go. Kind of thing. Because it's supposed to be funny. Most people laugh, always speak a little Klingon, a little Elvish too, high or low, So people make jokes, but then it's like when someone's for real, I'm like, oh, gotta go. You always get those people that are too straight-laced. My wife is not a geek, and so she started to every once in a while I'll say something. She goes, I don't get your reference, okay? You don't get it. Just go away with you.
Away with you. Dismissed.
Like I have
on the bridge.
At my office, I have a red stapler, a Swingline 747 in red. And half the people do not get why I have it. They're like, hey, can I borrow your stapler? I'm like, if you take my stapler, I'm going to burn your place down. And they're like,
oh my God.
You're going to burn the place down? I'm like, oh God. Go watch Office Space and get out. Get out of my office.
Yeah.
Give me back my stapler.
Call me weird later. It's your fault for not getting the goddamn reference.
Right. And you're like, why am I in HR about my stapler?
Oh,
you said you're going to burn the place down. No. Always these awkward moments as a geek. You're like, come on, people. Come on.
Get with it. Oh, man. And
hang on 1 second. The cat demands to be out, and I always fulfill my cat's duties. Hang on a second.
The cat, that is acceptable.
Sorry, my cat woke up from a nap, and she's like, "I want out." I said, "Okay," So, but it's it's nice to talk about the show because I feel like there are other shows like Enterprise or other shows that were forgotten, Space 1999, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
There's some shows that get remembered, and there's shows that enter into the geekdom, and
like it's even wild how years ago maybe 2 in 5 people knew what a brown coat is. Now just about every geek circle gets it. And it stuff takes time, and so you gotta just wait a while, really.
Oh, and it's weird because I wrote an art when I wrote the article on the M590. Every once in a while you see that prop get used or whatever, and there'll be little pieces. There was a Will Smith music video where he wears the helmet, the clamshell helmet. It's in one of his videos from the 90s, and I watched it. I was like, oh, they painted it black. I'm like, oh, that's one of the helmets from Space Above and Beyond. And I'm the only person that got that. I'm like, look, it's the helmet there.
Yeah, unless you're part of wardrobe, you're not going to get every.
Every once in a while, someone will go to a convention wearing an Angry Angels, the 127th, black. It's the easiest cosplay ever. And James Morris, every once in a while on Twitter, will post. He still has one of his original jumpsuits, and he'll post in it and be like, "Hey, look, I still fit in it."
It takes on all these different meanings, kind of.
It does, because for him, I don't know. Space and Beyond is like one of my favorite sci-fi shows. It's the show I kind of use as a geek.
Definitely one of the best of 95, 96 year in TV, because aside from just not being anything like that before, to leave a big impact, and then again to get right into it. It's like everything. They advertised the hell out of it, and it wasn't enough. But I mean, this is why we did a double feature of this in Firefly. Is like, initially we were just talking about these shows came in at the worst time, and despite being on the best network at that time that was willing to take a chance, management was changing around that time. I mean, having just gone off the phone and talking about all these other people who can recount everything that happened to them back in 2002 like it was yesterday, and truth be told, that's when I got a little better developed, and I can definitely remember a good chunk from that when I started developing my own interests and everything. But it's it's just maddening to have to just explain. And by the way, we can never relive that portion ever again. We can technically, we can relive a quarter of it. It's on DVD and everything, but the fact that you will never see that story concluded, and you're just going to have to talk to other fans if you want an answer. It's
and what you were kind of making reference to it earlier, and something there was a moment, and there were X-Files books, there were X-Files comics, there were some other stuff.
Yeah, some of them they ended up even having to contradict because some of the new stuff came out in the 2010s.
Yeah.
And they can do that because they always kind of play mind games. They're not like a Giallo or a Dogma 95 style movie where, they got too ambiguous and contrarian for their own good.
Exactly.
They can do that because they play all these mind games, and that's part of the gimmick, unlike M. Night Shyamalan or Chris Nolan, where they'll have 5 kick-ass one-line reveals, and then that last reveal, oof, that's too much for me. So yeah, Jordan Peele's kind of been doing it lately for me, and I'm just like, yeah, sorry, I like earlier Nolan, I'm not into Tenet. Peele, I like Get Out. I'll just leave it at that. Lovecraft Country.
I need to see Tenet. That's an interesting thing. It's been on my to do. I really like the new Batman movie, and I kind of got. I was debating about somebody, and they're like, "Well, you haven't seen Tenet yet." I'm like, "Well, okay, fine," because I made an Inception reference the other day in a training class I taught, and I was like, "Oh,
do you really?"
Yeah, I do, because I'm like, it's layer upon layer, just like Inception. If I'm not doing an '80s joke or something during one of my training classes, I'm just not living. And every once in a while I'll get somebody. I used to do this training game in a new employee training where they'd have to roll something. I'd be like, okay, roll for initiative. And every once in a while you get somebody who's like, I got you. Get a D20 out and make them roll. And they're like, this is interesting. I'm like, yeah, you got it in the old, Crown World bag.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you keep your dice if you're old. But I agree. You're never going to get the flavor, the context, the people that did the X-Files, and the mood, and that thing that existed, and even the way they projected the technology. And Space Above and Beyond, like you said, did a better job. But there's things in that show, if they ever redo it, it's like Battlestar. They're going to have to basically say, we're going to keep, and even Battlestar, I mean, geeks will get.
Yeah, they've tried so much with BSG, and I think fans are finally kind of getting over themselves. I mean, they did Caprica, and that was a like it or hate it. They did the Adama
I feel
TV
bad
movie.
about that show. Not that it was bad. I just feel bad they never got an ending to it.
Yeah, it seemed like, I think the biggest issue was Universal at that point. Like much like with Fox. Fox was his own worst enemy more often than not, and same thing with Universal. Like they had sci-fi, but they didn't like it, so that's why they encouraged the movies to be bad, so they could change their programming or some shit. And it just, they don't seem to realize how good they had it. Like I lost track of how many times I'd be at a friend's house or with family at home, and Stargate and BSG are on every Friday, and you're going to remember it because you can't not unsee it or not remember it. And then this show is much the same way, is like much like when you see the creators' utter work on the X-Files saga. I mean, I went for Lone Gunman 2 years ago on YouTube.
Oh my god,
that was interesting. It was like, talk about a show I did not give a chance. I was a casual X-Files guy, and I liked those characters, but I didn't. And I think a lot of people are now, much like people who are watching Space because they've seen all the other shows, like, they've seen all the tracks, they've seen all the wars, they've seen, again, all the B5 Battlestar stuff, and they want something else that's similar, regardless of what era it was made in. Same kind of deal they're doing here with these kinds of shows, is that they're realizing, whoa, this was kind of like this. So Vince Gilligan has a legion of fans from his Breaking Bad saga, but people are wanting, people are now I think we're seeing a return to people are respecting head writers and wanting to see other cool stuff they worked on. And I think they're understanding his humor even more.
It's like, you'll get somebody that creates something like True Detectives or whatever, and people fall. And for when it
only comes once in a while, once in a blue moon.
Every once in a while, you'll get those shows, and it's very interesting because Space Above and Beyond, it's kind of like Millennium we were talking about earlier, and Space Above and Beyond. If today they probably could have survived and been celebrated, especially after what happened with Galactica. Galactica took, I didn't think it was going to make it, and I didn't think the writers. I thought after they discovered Earth,
and it was ballsy too for Edward James Olmos to be at a convention and let the cat out of the bag and say, anyone who wants this to be like the last show, I'm an actor. I respect our brand. I respect this. I'm telling you, don't waste your time. It will never be the same. And that kind of got him in even more interested. It's like, whoa, that wasn't scripted. Obviously, the producers gave him permission to go there. And he that was back when we lived by the whole, any promotion's good promotion. And it seemed like, I think it just came out of the worst year, back when, as a contrast, look at how there's all these podcasts that are honoring Tales from the Crypt and even getting people who worked on that show on. You can watch every episode now on YouTube. Ridiculous. HBO.
Thanks to HBO for that.
Yeah, they don't own it. They don't own it anymore. It's just unthinkable. And I think people are having to now realize you came in at a time when it's like we were so spoiled. We were so used to all these other options that we could pay extra. And now there's all these other streaming and people, you can't go a single site without someone debating, unsubscribe from this, subscribe to this if you want that. And it's like we're back to rivalries again, but people are forgetting when you were so fortunate to have what you had back then. You make extra time for it that you now don't have. I think 95, 96, it was just a bad year. People were getting so distracted by what they didn't have and other stuff going on socially, economically. And I think it just wasn't meant to be, which sucks because had this been on, say, Showtime or something else, it would have probably lasted a little longer, I think.
A little longer.
Because they weren't as reliant on the clicks, as we are now with.
And I think also, okay, so when the new Battlestar comes out, we had 9/11. There's a lot of 9/11 in there.
And they made that part of that in Enterprise. And I seem to be the only guy who got
Enterprise,
it.
Yes.
Everyone
100%.
Else didn't seem to get it unless there was a Middle Eastern terrorist,
No.
as the weekly villain. And I totally got it. I totally got, okay. I mean, they even said explicitly, these terrorists are coming for, I'm like, how can you not get the gist of that metaphor?
Yeah. The Xindi and the attack on Earth and Tucker's sister dying, his baby sister dying.
And how they all changed in that whole season. Because, Manny Koto was
beautiful.
Before he became the head writer in season 4, he pretty much told them his notes he kept given to the writers' room is, we got to make this like Crimson Tide in outer space. We got to make it more claustrophobic. We got to make it more, they got something to actually lose. And there's a game plan, much like Voyager, they're going to get home, but it's going to be quicker. It's going to be more dangerous. It's going to be more perilous, and it's going to be more rewarding. And they just waited too long. It's just a shame. Good on them that everyone's kind of putting their vices behind anyone who, it's a shame that they can pretty much only do it with these spinoffs. They're never gonna, most of the original track guys have already passed away, so they'll never make amends. Like, hey, I'm sorry I was a douche to you back in the day.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm honored that we got to be famous together for 3 years after the fact. But it is cool that. So here's our proposition. With Will and I being one of many big fans, there needs to be a podcast where they get all these guys back together and they watch an episode on YouTube.
Yeah, there does. I know that
James is so big. The McQueen actor, James Morrison's so big on Facebook, and he always has such witty tweets. Like, people will ask him in some of those acting groups, is like, what's the most unconvincing acting? And he'll chime in and have a fun, amusing pick. And everyone will always reply to it. Oh my God, I forgot about that. That was an infamous moment.
It's funny because, he was a clown. He was, he was in a circus or something I read once, and he's a funny guy. Like, I've watched interviews with him.
He was in a circus?
Yeah, I'd have to look it up. I remember reading once that
so no wonder he came ready to play.
Yeah, and then the episode where they get the green meanies and they go on R&R, and you got Coolio there, and you got Dave Duchovny playing the billiard,
with the crazy eyes. Yeah.
God, that episode is it's worth watching. Her play pool.
It's such a silly episode, and yet it is totally like even typical William Gibson. Like, everyone reveals everything. over a bunch of cards, pool table, and a noir type setting. And once the saxophone kicks in, you're instantly like engaged.
Yep.
And now this is second nature. We see something like this on Altered Carbon all the time, but it's like, still, guys, this was no one else wanted to do this on network TV unless it was like a historical miniseries.
Exactly. That episode is weird. I need to
or
go back.
on a holodeck. But again, still, it's a big it's a big guess. It's a big want. And to let them give you permission to do this, and Coolio, he's never been better. Most of the time he was kind of like a typical rapper playing himself, and somehow they could always get all these reality TV personas, all these different kinds, and much like Tales from the Crypt, kind of like play around with them, and then make you wonder. Unless you're on that set, I am wondering how on earth you made this person play something other than themselves. How you made this world and have it make sense, even though on paper it could easily backfire.
You know who they were going to get on that show? I found this out the other day.
I'm all ears.
Johnny Cash was going to play.
So they got him to play his music.
They were going to try to get him on, and they could not line it up. I read it recently that it was an interview I read. I was prepping for this. And going back to
I appreciate you, dude.
It was weird. There's Space Above Beyond's one of these shows, like the actor who played the president, who actually has one of the better speeches ever in sci-fi. Like, if you feel the sun's warmth, then you're in danger. Or whatever. Like, my God, that's a brilliant speech.
That is a great line, just because it's a simple metaphor.
Yes.
But so many people have stuff like this backfire because they like to get too cute. They like to, again, pull a Nolan or instead of just being surreal. Like, I mean, we can critique a movie we do or don't like, say by Oliver Stone or Spike Lee, but truth be told, people know what they're getting into already because they have their signature style. And so these guys already had their signature style, and they're just only enhancing it all the more. They're bringing in Morgan's brother to write more when he's got a break from Millennium. They're having all this other stuff. And like you say, it's like when they're getting these guests, they want more than just the star power and extra ratings. They want them to play around with the material and have it make better sense for other people who may or may not get it. It's just, it seems like it's unfathomable nowadays. Nowadays, everybody seems to want to just go back to the old routine. Special guest appearance by Academy Award winner. It's like, okay, that's fine. But remember back when you did take a bigger chance, everyone told you that's a bad idea, and you went ahead with it anyway, and it blew everyone away. It seems like you get much more no in the development room.
Yeah. I'm always impressed. You can say what you want about Tom Cruise, but him in Collateral is brilliant. Was Michael Mann.
Totally.
God, I saw that movie.
Best use of digital cameras. It seems like people don't know how to use actors in unrecognizable roles as much now, and same thing with digital. Is like they don't use it the way Michael Mann used it when he initially used it. to have everybody be a character, in that crime tale of Collateral. It is like, and that's a good contrast, because what that movie and especially this show did well was use a bunch of metaphors, use a bunch of different elements. Everything matters as much, the pool table matters as much in this scene as the new guest star character and the recurring characters. It all matters. And it seems like if you're going to play outside your so-called table, it's got to be basically, I don't know what the answer is, because it seems like they don't know the answer either.
I think I'll never forget that episode we're talking about R&R when Hawks is high on the green meetings and he stumbles into that thing with a crib, and the girl he's with is there in vitro too, and there's a lot with that in vitro stuff. You remember when Hawks and McQueen get interviewed for the TV show, and
they're being put on the spot. That episode was wild. Because This time around, I'm just more used to it. Like there being a documentary crew because they've done that in everything: Bones, Homicide, even a really good West Wing episode.
X-Files. They did one with cops.
They got to, and it's just so fun because it's basically an excuse to show more secrets that the fans have been clamoring, and then do more fourth wall breaking, which makes it even more hysterical. Just because the documentary crew member will almost always, on all those examples I've listed, like that someone always asks a hardened character and a question that breaks them, and we the audience, the voyeurs, get to know even more about them as a result. And it's like, see, this is what I like about life imitating art. You're making use of this gimmick, and it is actually moving the story forward as opposed to a skip it or miss it episode.
Yeah, it's like I remember, God, this is going to be horrible. I'll make this reference. There was an episode of Hercules where they made the cast of Hercules the writers for an episode. And
oh my God.
It's crazy, but it's actually brilliant. It's like, and Dave Duchovny being on there and a couple other people that showed up on that show and other people that became big later. It's hard. It's hard when I watch it because as what I do and the passion I have for the genre that it fits in, okay, so we're kind of talking about time. I want to come back to this because in 1995, I was 18 years old, right? I have really big memories of 1995. Some I will not talk about on here. But anyway, we were at peace. 6 years later, we're at war. We're at war. Basically, depending on how you put it, we still are in some ways.
Right. I mean, that new show Rabbit Hole is kind of doing that too, where we're talking about corporate spies, and it's just so sad because we can never get this off our mind. It's always there. It's infectious.
It is. In 1995, which is interesting, we come out of the 80s, we come out of this kind of militaristic period. So we have the 90s.
The Cold War. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's no big enemies left. So then this military science fiction show, it's not, DS9 leading up to it or, Stargate or B5. B5 laid, foundation for years to come up to the Shadow War. We're all like, woo, But Space Rebellion was hard. People died. People cared. People bled out.
Yes.
It was gutsy as it possibly could. People,
all didn't really rely on all that much star power other than the ones we mentioned here. For the most part, it was just like working actors and they'd give them an unusual role and they'd kill it. And you're like, that was fucking awesome. Who was that guy? He really was believable as that alien or as that. When you get into some of the other actors who have also been on all the other X-Files Millennium type stuff, let alone any show, the one military guy who's like being a total asshole to him, like they're training him, they're like, you're coming in way too hot, like what's your deal? It's clearly something personal, and he's like, I'll tell you later. And then he takes them on a mission, and then they find out, oh, this wasn't even approved by the high command. You're technically should be in prison. What? It's just
exactly.
To do that. And I think I still don't know why this didn't catch on, to have this many 180 twists every episode. I mean, I don't think audiences were that dumb. I think they were getting even more adjusted, and they're definitely catering to. 96 was a huge year for blockbusters and everything. So I 95 too, but so I don't know why. Were people just going too much to the movies and not watching that much TV at that point? It was lame. Now it's cool again. Now it's lame again. What's going on here?
I really do think, as a person that was very much alive, oddly enough, by the way, in 1996, the movie they filmed in my hometown in Ponca City aired. I lived in the town where they filmed Twister. I actually met Bill Paxton.
Wild.
I've met Bill Paxton. One of my favorite B movies I forgot to talk to him about. Like, I talked to him about, of course, Aliens, right? Because I'm a kid. I met him at the bookstore and I freaked out on him. I should have asked him about one of my favorite B movies he's in with Mark Hamill. And
Slipstream.
Yeah, 1989. And I love that freaking movie. And
it is a fun movie. Yeah.
Directed by the same guy, guy who invented Tron. That movie to me is one of the big what ifs. And the soundtrack is done by one of the best Hollywood soundtrack guys. I still listen to it. I listened to it today actually.
Was it Tangerine Dream or was it?
No, it was Bernstein.
Wow.
Yeah, he did it. He did
one of the greats. Man.
He did like 50 minutes of it. It's not very much. There was a group that was going to be really big at the time. It's got that movie. If I ever meet Mark Hamill, That's what I want to talk to him about. I don't want to talk to him about Star Wars. I don't give a shit. I want to talk to you about Slipstream, dude. You know, and
Yeah,
Bill
I'm going to ask him about
Paxton's
Sushi Girl and some of these other cult movies
Yeah.
he's been in. I'm sure he gets plenty of questions about Guyver and any, Joker.
Yeah.
But yeah, just let him know. Hey, I remember you on even this. I remember you on Chuck. I remember on Criminal Minds. I remember on even Third Rock from the Sun where you play yourself. You want to tell someone, hey, I appreciate you.
Yeah.
But it's more than that. I actually watch your work. There are other people who see it. And just because you don't see much fan mail about it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's there.
Yeah, because he uses a Desert Eagle, and the movie was an extended barrel, right? So I wrote this an article about the Desert Eagle. It's in the movie. So I reached out to him and said, dude, I want to talk about Slipstream because I want to talk about the Desert Eagle. And he's probably like, who is this nutbag on Twitter in this weird astronaut with a gun? I'm not going to even, because my thing on Twitter is an astronaut with a gun. And he's like, I don't want to talk to you or whatever. And I don't want to talk to you about Luke Skywalker. I want to talk about, it's like if I ever met Michael Biehn, who played Hicks, right? Who played Kyle Reese, who is fantastic. He was just on a major podcast 2 weeks ago, and it's about 2 hours long. It's beautiful. I want to talk to him about K2, about the movie he made about scaling K2. That's a movie I want to talk to him about.
I know someone in college, that was their favorite movie by him. They were a fan of the James Cameron movies, but yeah, he would always bring up K2. I'm like, interesting. Yeah, this is
the movie. I watched it on HBO in the 90s.
Are you talking about Michael Rosenbaum?
What's that?
Was it the Michael Rosenbaum podcast which Bean was on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I will check it out.
That he talks about a stroke. He talks about alcoholism. I used to work in an alcohol rehab for the county, and it's interesting. One of my other tracks I'm out with. That's a thing that Space Above Beyond did, by the way. Speaking of, okay, so there's a moment where Shane and Danfus they're captured during the mission to bomb the Chicks world, which they kind of do to like Doolittle's Raid, which is brilliant. A lot of the history they throw into this is so brilliant. And I remember they do a thing in there because the Silicates, remember, they were given a virus by Stranahan, was the name. I can't believe I remember all this crap. I can't remember where I put my socks, but I can remember the inventor who implanted the virus named Stranahan. And he implanted something, take a chance. I used to do a whole training on choice or chance, and I used to use that line. And I used to use the dialogue from that episode. And no one knew in this training at a mental health facility that I was quoting a science fiction show from the 90s, like choice or chance.
So this movie has not only empowered your life, but it's also helped you as a leader, as a team member in any kind of problem solving. And that's the best part of all this. That's when they've done more than just their job.
I think Star Trek gets a lot of, people talk about like Star Trek, like, obviously Star Trek has some of like, the episode where Data goes on, Second Season where he goes on, Trial for His Life. It's brilliant. And there are people that become lawyers. I used to use it. I used to use that episode. Because
it's more than just a legal show. Yeah. Like now it's all kinds of cerebral stuff that, not just anyone can talk about.
Elysium, District 9. I'll give you Alien Nation.
Alien Nation. I heard a great interview with Steve Johnson not too long ago, and he was off and running. He was really good at just talking about is like they gave me everything I needed, and then every fan I know of that show, Alien Nation, has pretty much gotten it, which is already a blessing because everyone I pitched it to did not get it. I said, yes, I'll make it like this, but they didn't get what I was going for. So, I mean, that's the ultimate reward for any creator when you can tell them, I understand entirely what you're creating.
And I think as any creator, if you're allowed to create with the freedom, and it's what George Lucas once said. I remember in a Vanity Fair article he wrote in 1999 when he was filming episode 1. When they did Vanity Fair scored that major interview. Right.
Yeah, SAG tried to block it. They're like, you're not getting onto this independent movie. Sam Jackson almost doesn't get on. And Lucas is like, I'm not letting you cock block him. He's getting on my movie.
Exactly. And Lucas once said, that Star Wars and the money he got, he said, allowed him to buy his freedom from the great machine. It's one of my favorite quotes.
It is a wonderful thing. Him and Rodriguez saying, just quit, go ahead and quit the Actors Guild. Yep. You're not happy there. Or the Directors Guild. You'll get to do whatever you want. Because I'm going to open the movie however I damn please. And telling me, I got to do it this way and that way. That's already, a wrong.
Rodriguez is interesting because I know he gets crap about this, but I'll say it. I'm a big Aliens Predator person. Obviously, Predator is perfect.
I love all kinds of things, but we're having to tell these people, hey, it's okay to like it. There's going to be a fan of even the worst sequel, People with Strange New Worlds are trying to have Star Trek V finally make sense. And I applaud it because they're actually, instead of just throwing it out, they're taking the good that did work and they're making it make sense.
Yeah, it does have the first example of the phaser being reloaded on screen. They put the clip into the assault phaser that they had at the time. Oh God, I can't believe I know that. Rodriguez, I love Predators. I thought Predators was brilliant.
I saw it in theaters, and I was having to school my aunt and uncle because they weren't getting some of the Easter eggs. I'm like, see, that's the same song that he listens to in the first movie. I'm like, oh, okay.
And the kid, not a kid, but what is his? He has a really funny name. The guy who played
Topher Grace.
Topher Grace. He is so fantastic in that movie. Creepy as shit. And then
I want to see his Star Wars edits.
Oh God, he's one of those guys. I think that's a lot more. He's one of those like Mensa level brilliant people that you encounter. And I know people get Brody crap. I actually thought he was really good in it. I like Predators.
I was a bigger fan. That reminded me, hey, he is a good actor. What happened to him for a while now?
And people are like, oh, I hated this movie. And I'm like, the movie is like, when I watched, I was like, God, I would totally have done that as a plot. And only Rodriguez could have done it. And he did it in Austin, and it's just cool when he got the guy who plays Nolan Fishburne. Brilliant.
Yes, Lawrence Fishburne. Brilliant. If I can see them, so can they. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, 2 or 3 seasons now, right? No, 4 seasons. No,
can't believe it, but he's doing a hell of a job.
I was like, man, I totally buy it. God, that's well, for every Predators, we got to get RoboCop 2 and RoboCop 3. But it's. I want so much one of these days that I want to get Space Above and Beyond again, like we were talking about earlier. But in some ways, I think some of the touchingness, the X-Files loom and shadow that came over it in a right way, and the actors that played in it, and some of them were new, they were babies, they were able to do it, and it's like, who would you cast as McQueen, right? Who would you get? Tucker Smallwood is wonderful as the commander of the Saratoga.
And I'm so glad that they paid, them back, just like any good showrunner, they keep inviting the actors and filmmakers back. And I'm glad that they would always have the space guys show up on later Millennium and X-Files episodes. They're all good actors but Tucker is definitely the first one I recognize. Obviously I know Morrison's name, but he's still not a name actor. And he was cool. He was like the second one I knew the most because he's a former, Vietnam vet, and I've just seen him play so many other NASA and, authority figures. He's even on Enterprise, but, he's in makeup. You remember his voice, not the, face.
Yeah, you hear his voice, and, him as a person and him as McQueen is very different. And McQueen is such a wonderful character. Even Hawks.
We cannot do that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's okay to be scared. God, I love that episode where they mock him. You're okay. This one's in the kitchen, and you're gonna have water, and it's gonna be hot, and it's gonna be cold. And when the actor who plays Wayne is mocking, my God, I still find, and I'm even doing a version of that. It's gonna be a real nice fight, and and then Morrison comes in and busts him. He goes, "Man, it's hard to follow the dog act." I'm like, God, and being like, I think I was like, I was 19 actually in that show. I was 19, and I borrowed like phrases from that show are in my phraseology.
To make it be that second nature is very delightful.
Yeah, it's like today my boss said something to me. I said, "Man, you really giving me a jalapeno enema today." And I was like, she's like, "What?" And I was like, and it's just, and she laughs, she's medical, and we had a good laugh, or like just anything. It's funny how like I will tell people, you just watch your six around them. What? And I got that from Space Above and Beyond.
There you go. All the military phrases. Watch your six.
Watch your six. Watch each other's sixes. Or
and what's funny is the way they say even the simplest phrases is still pretty different from how you usually hear it. It's not anywhere near the same as like what you might hear during a gaming station. Oh, this blows. Like
right.
They will say, "This sucks. This really sucks."
The Dover Chippy Man, you know, and all of them, you know. I love when Vanessa gets the knife from Vance for Christmas, and she goes, "I'll be honored, stab a chick with this." I'm like, God, that's and the way she says it's so sweet and menacing. I'm like, God. Or they had some really good actors that played in the episode with the SS MacArthur, where they have the ship that's hunting him through the blood alley. It's like the third episode where the crew. The crew in Hawks finds his sister. God, and they're talking about the genetics. And I was like, God, the thing about the in vitros, and I wish they'd had more time to develop it because there was much more in there, and they didn't get to talk about like you know when McQueen's talking about Silicon War, talking about when he was loading munitions at Port Riskin. Once again, I can't believe I remember that, but I do. And you know the people, and they're like, all this chick died. The human officer never got convicted. And I served all this time, and then I was shipped off to Draconian. You know, he gets shipped off to Star, and one time I looked it up. I'm like, it's got to be real. It's too cool. And it's like 100 light years. I'm like, okay, they didn't travel that far.
They did have a science consultant.
Yeah, because I was Omicron Draconis.
But this is what I like too. Like most people, in even a screenwriting class, probably won't teach this because they're not big on mumbo jumbo and exposition and everything. It's like you still should watch these so that you understand how you can do something like this successfully instead of just acting like, oh, it's genre. You got to be. It's like show them how to get experience with said genre. Show them how to do it better, because like not every sci-fi movie, you know, throws out its logic in favor of, you know, explosions. Some of them do follow all the rules, and there's others that follow the rules, but then they are let down by an out of place ending. You know,
it's like for instance, Groombridge 34 is mentioned in Thriller Star, and I love the fact that they included, and I never heard of the Kuiper Belt. It's in there, you know, and to me, when I write to this very day, I put real stars in all my stuff. I did a reference to, I talked about Groombridge 34 in my Just Lost Black post about troop ships. You know, talking about Cameron. Cameron's the only guy who's ever put a realistic faster than light spaceship on TV, on movie. The ISSCV, ISSV, the ISV Venture Star from Avatar is the most realistic ship ever put on screen. Like, wow. That thing is 100% correct. And you watch that, but then it's like, but then you got, okay, I love the Saratoga design. I think the Saratoga, when you talk about, you know, everyone pictures the Galactica or anything from Star Trek or Star Wars, the toga is, what a beautiful design. I'll never forget the one that was destroyed and it was floating through space and you didn't know it was destroyed. It was at the Sugar Dote episode. And it's drifting by. You're like, what if it got destroyed? And you felt it. Remember the bombers come out of the sun and they're shooting at the A. Oh my God, that opening, I was like, oh my God. Once again, if I don't smoke, but I might have started during that. So like, slower. Go ahead. No, slower. I want to, you know. And I'll never forget the other day. Oh God. So the other day, the Ramones come on the radio.
Right. They happen to be one that's coincidentally in the episode.
Let's go. And I'm mimicking the episode from the pilot where they're on bars. And my wife's like, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm doing a reference. She goes, stop. I said, it's like the Ramones and all that stuff. And she goes, stop. And then they do the counting on the Mars. They have the little lights on their suits. They got full God. It's just, it really hurts me sometimes that show never made it because I wonder what gifts it could have given us.
I'm just glad they were also able to work out music rights because it seems like every other show suffered from that. And it was like, are you kidding me? You know, because even X-Files itself, like they had so many metal and electronic artists on there. And it seems like so many people they'll have a cool idea and they won't think out anything else that might impact it. And it's like, but here's the thing, this song needs to be in this, you know, episode, you know.
How would Ray Butch the episode be without Johnny Cash? I don't think you could have it.
I don't think it would have anywhere near. I mean, it was the go-to pop culture influence, you know?
Like he's pouring the JD into the cup, and Vanson walks in, and you hear the music, and you hear the music that Johnny Cash produced, and you hear that, and you hear Vanson come in, that whole interchange, she and Ray butts out, but he's drinking, and you take out that music, it doesn't work the same way, but because that music's in there. And especially like where they slow it down, he goes, "Goodbye, Bob," and he breaks up and he goes through, he goes, "Hoorah," and he breaks up into the black hole. God, that was brilliant. See, once again, how this show not make it? I'm sitting here been geeking out for like 2 hours, and it's like a show that no one remembers. And I write about, and people will come and talk about it, and you'll see.
I think you're in luck. My pal Gershom has seen it, and I'm seeing some other people mix it into their own cosplay. But like you say, you don't know until you know, and then when you know, you're still like, oh, where were you? Besides on the other side of the country, and we didn't have cell phones, but still.
We're worried. And that's the thing. It's like the X-Files and shows like it. I mean, sci-fi was big in the 90s. It actually had a resurgence, and I've talked a lot about it, that there was a golden period, and one of the big forces responsible, this is after the Star Wars, all that thing, but like X-Files made it where you could sit down, like we were talking about earlier, where my mother-in-law and I we're sitting there watching pizza, watching X-Files, and going, oh my God. And Lost and shows like that did allow people, even Balsar had a thing where people got into it. But Space Above and Beyond sort of had that sort of dent, and it had something in 1995, a hard-edged military science fiction show that was military, not Starfleet, not cutie uniforms that were colored, but actual Marines acting like heartbreakers and life takers. That show in 1995 could happen because we were at peace. And not that there's anything wrong with that. The 90s were great. Sorry if anyone missed them. They were great. But
I concur.
With that,
I concur. Best decade ever.
Yeah, I mean,
even when it wasn't working, it was still pretty well working.
It was not the horror show that is now, but today. But see, the ironic thing is that there's so much war within military, because we've been at war for over 20 years. So I think our society, it's like Battlestar Galactica. Battlestar Galactica is very hard edged. It's still where people
very edgy.
Very edgy.
You're bringing all these issues that most of the time they did not want to deal with sci-fi. You would deal with it on a more obscure DS9 episode, maybe at Next Gen. Like, okay, so this is an allegory for a war crime, a psychological disruption, or fear mongering, or whatever. Drug addiction.
Xenophobia.
Racism, especially, they would hit on. There's like, okay, these two characters are never going to get along, and they're bringing all these supporters with them. Some third party has got to intervene, even though they've taken an oath. I will not intervene because this is just and growing up, it's just so wild how I thought it was an allegory for like Bosnians and Serbian war and other stuff like that. Now, pretty much with all the other stuff we're seeing, like Palestinians and Israelis still instigating conflicts, is like these are everlasting themes that go beyond any era that it was created in. So, yeah.
And and then when and the chicks themselves were very multifaceted. I was, and I've read about what they were going to do in season 2. I've kind of read there were lots of things about what they were going to do, and McQueen especially getting an artificial leg and some other stuff they were going to do with him, and they were going to solve some of the big questions about what happened to Vanson and Danfus.
Very special stuff, yeah.
But A will never see it. I don't think there are any scripts because I've tried to figure out if I could actually find get scripts, and once again I think it's kind of like what the Enterprise, the cast of Enterprise, Star Trek Enterprise have talked about. The only way to get the seasons we never saw is either AI or we do a comic, we do an anime, because AI is starting to get good enough that you potentially could feed in whatever.
An audio drama with the cast returning. That would sell out on Audacity. I guarantee it. Even on Spotify. Just put it on there. Have the creators come back, get permission from, I don't know, Village Roadshow and Fox TV, and just say, boom. this is the third season. This is what you're gonna get. If you don't like it, don't complain. Do a cartoon substitute if you want to do that. But yeah, I prefer.
I mean, how good would Space Bug be as an anime? Like a good anime. God.
I could see it working, especially if you got some Akira level. I mean, that's what they were promising with this upcoming. We were talking off mic about this new Lord of the Rings anime, and they got some of what's her name who played Eowyn to return, and they have another awesome voice actor being the narrator, and so I was just like, see, I always thought Lord of the Rings would be a wonderful anime, but there's so many other things that could even go beyond that. Even people who aren't even into cartoons, like they've shown numerous times it can be done. Archer and South Park are very funny, even if you're not into cartoons, because they know how to write out their gags and where they go. You're just like, man, you can't even do that live action because it just wouldn't work.
Archer has breast cancer. One, it's funny but sad, but funny but sad. And then when he tortures the people for
yes,
no one is my rage. Yeah, God, I was like, God, how is this funny? And I'm laughing. I'm going to hell for laughing.
Yeah, because if someone did it live action, I don't think any of us would laugh. And somehow having it in a cartoon format, I mean, just like these various comic books that have, done additional seasons of whatever, it's just like that. And that's the last literally 3 pages. And I get something good that some movie executives are unable to put together as a sequel that works. It's mind opening. And it just shows you that a different medium allows for different rule breaking. So.
It's kind of like when Blade Runner 2049 was coming out, and then the director can never pronounce his name right, so I won't do
it. Let's just say Dennis V. But yeah, Dennis Villeneuve. Yeah, he's coming out. He's already knowing. Hey, I'm promising you the world. Obviously I can't please everybody, but I'm doing the best. I have Ridley Scott come to the set. He's given me tips on what frames he wants in here, and I still got my vision. I got a great cinematographer, but yeah,
it's just I was when he did the 3 shorts before, when he did about Wallace, and he did 2 live action. He did the one about Sepher, but then he did the one about the anime. I can't remember the guy who got for the anime. Of course, he did the Blade Runner anime later that was on
yes, Altered Carbon. I think
Black.
Wasn't it Altered Carbon?
Yeah, what was the name of that?
I'm
the chick.
I'm sorry, I don't remember the name, but
God, and the anime was kind of weird the way they did it. The song, I think it was about some of the guys who did Bebop. But anyway, but it was interesting how they did this.
That's probably why they made that live action Bebop show.
They did. God, oh God, that would be listed as one of the great crimes of the 21st century.
Right.
But it's interesting how they did the anime of The Great Blackout, which is mentioned, and then you watch these, and people that have asked me like, "Oh, should I watch Blade Runner?" I'm like, "You got to get on YouTube and watch these 3 because it'll help you with story." And one of them is an anime, and it's fantastic. And it's like, you remember the Animatrix they did.
And I think a lot of them often go back to that format. They realized it worked so well for that, and Warner Brothers was willing to play around with it again. I mean, they did a Halo anime. There's really only one great teller there, and it's just like people can explore. And I mean, when you open the cartoon or anime door, you still open up an even bigger audience than what you had before, because now there's even different kinds of fans who want to see this, regardless of whether they're the initial fan base or not.
Yeah, it's like one of the very first adaptions of Starship Troopers is an anime from '80.
Yeah, the '80s. Yeah,
'88. And I did a whole thing on that. And God, I found them on YouTube, and I watched them.
The manga, even. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I went through that, and it was really interesting. I actually pitched writing it as a article for an anime magazine recently, and I'm waiting to hear back. But it was interesting because I knew it existed from a line in the back of a book about Robotech, which is one of the things I love. And I was like, "Ooh, there was an anime about Starship Troopers." And then later, when the internet became a thing, I could actually see it. I'm like, wow, they really did something different, and it's not just Werhoven. And you go through that. And then they come out with another anime on top of it that was like the one on Mars, and then I was like, God, it's so interesting how you can take that, and maybe someone will look at Space Above and Beyond and say, okay, we could do this as a series on Crunchyroll or whatever, and they could do it.
instead of just you're coming to us because you gone through Troopers, you gone through Track, you gone through some of the other similar stuff. It's good
I'm
to
hoping
be like people who go to the Expanse. They came to it just because they'd only heard about that and they wanted to give it a shot.
God, I can't believe, every once in a while there's some really brave sci-fi. There's, stuff that goes outside. And as much as I love Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks and all that stuff, it's still Trek. And I love Trek. I mean, I'm a Trekkie since
The
79.
best of all worlds. That's what we're going here for here. Yeah.
But when you get something kind of like, this is the thing I try to put in context whenever I write about some of these shows, and especially when I get trapped in the 80s and 90s thinking future stories, I say, what you don't understand is we today are spoiled by choice with all the different media. In fact, the fact that we're
exactly. We got a PG-13 cartoon. We got a G-rated cartoon. We got an R-rated Picard take. We got a gritty version of Discovery, which is kind of like Enterprise is trying to do its own prequel spinoff, and Strange New Worlds is kind of trying to do its own take on original while going its own route. So it's like when they were saying we might play around with a Section 31, it's like, yeah, they'll do it, but Discovery and Picard got to leave first, and then they got to come in, and then they can't do what they did before, where they had 3 spinoffs all at once, and then
I'll never forget that.
Right, because I mean, Brendan Braga said it best, on years ago, and even in various interviews, is like we wrote ourselves into a corner, and we weren't prepared to get out of that corner. And it's like, that's awful. No one should have to encounter that,
Yeah, because that's what Trek was.
Because you get burned out. You can only write so much, and if you're in a bad mood and everyone's telling you, I fucking hate this, well, I can't do a better job because you hate my shit. I've tried. And
look at Ronald D. Moore. Ronald D. Moore got refused a lot of stuff. He tried to put some bold stuff in the Trek. Some of the best episodes of Next Generation, some other stuff for him.
Did you ever see his show, Good versus Evil?
Yeah, he goes, screw it, I'm going to go my Belstar. And then he made a pilot for Fox, which is one of my favorites, Virtuality. And
it was a great pilot.
I watched that once a year. And one of the main characters was, I based her off my first book. My character, the actress,
sweet.
And but
I should tell him that if you ever meet him at a convention, hey, your work is appreciated, even though people can only see some of it on YouTube or
Yeah, Virtuality I bought on a disc for $5 at Blockbuster here in Arlington, and I was like,
I think I did too.
Yeah, I want to meet him and say, tell me what the guy was that was killing everyone.
Why didn't this launch?
I need to know. Why didn't? And that's
right. And what is the cliffhanger was left on that will never be resolved? And he'll probably hint at it, and then
he probably doesn't know. He's probably when he was still drinking or whatever he was, because Ronald D. Moore kind of lives hard. I wonder. It's just like I wept so much that final episode in 2005 when I watched the last 4 episodes, by the way, in a row because I had never seen them. So like get home on DVD and you have to flip them, of course, which is so ridiculous. And I watched them and I thought, wait a minute, I'm never going to get an answer to this one. And it says A&amp, right? I'm like, no.
That's why I like Sean Ryan. He's gone around it because he most of the time always wraps up a season. And he has its own movie, but I think I can understand it. If you want something to last longer, you that was how people started forcing their way back on the air. It's like, okay, if you want it concluded, we're in it on a cliffhanger, and don't blame me.
Because Serenity is such a rarity. I mean, if
it was a total rarity, let alone 2 different studios. Fox owns it, and it sells it to Universal. I'm like, what?
And then the movie's amazing.
Yeah. And then you can get into it without knowing anything, and the actors are good at getting you to care about these people, even if you don't have the backstory. Yeah, it's just.
And then you have one of the greatest lines ever uttered in cinema. I aim to misbehave. I use that every day. I mean, Nathan Fillion is a god, and I would, I'd vote for him for president or whatever. He's Canadian. I don't really care. Nathan Fillion's amazing. That movie has so much balls, and it does in such direction, and I don't think that the actor Nathan Fillion gets enough credit. All of them, and I'll never forget watching that and the power. And I will watch. I watch Firefly about once, maybe a year, maybe less, and every time I watch those shows and I watch serenity. It gets me. And there's such power in that. It's like Space Above Beyond. We've been sitting here talking about a show that was filmed and using.
I think it was briefly on Netflix in the 2010s, but very
Really?
brief.
Very brief. And it's not really aired. You'll see. People will. There's a whole community on Twitter of some of the people that worked on the show. That's why I interviewed to try to get information on the M590. Someone has the actual cockpit would have the screens in it from the SA-43. Some guy owns it. He talks about having it. Yep. The full plane exists somewhere. So it was sitting
Somewhere.
in a warehouse.
Yes, it does. Yep.
I would stab a check to get my hands on some of that stuff and say, I just want one thing from that show. I want like a helmet. I want whatever. I just want something because it's such a special show. Someone sold recently the thing that Nathan pulls out to meet his brother across no man's land, the little thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was that. Right? Like, I know what that is.
Right. I still want to know what it means. It really means, other than it's something the character carries.
Exactly. Yeah, I've spent way too much time on that show. Like the various things that they use, the equipment.
It's worth it. It's worth it. When I first saw it, I thought, this Malcolm guy, he is the next Starbuck Han Solo. He's too cool.
Yep. It's just, I don't know. That's what makes it hard. I think most sci-fi fans, they enter into an abusive relationship in the genre because we have gotten,
we got to band together. We all want the same thing.
We all want the same thing.
And there's always some toxic guys, trying to start up again the old, Trek versus wars, and it's just like, just stop. You're all here because you want the same thing. Same thing at a horror convention. Okay, if you don't want to be here for Freddy Krueger or the Candyman, you can say hi to the Wishmaster or Jason. It's just like there is something for everybody. Stop dividing
one of
those
my favorite
gatekeepers.
horror movies of all time is Nazi Zombies. Is The Outpost from 2008.
There you go. The Punisher taking out the trash. A lot of fun.
Oh my God, that movie's so amazing. I had a friend show me The Outpost, and every once in a while, people are like, I really want an interesting horror movie with like Nazis. Okay, it's The Outpost from 2008. Go watch it. This movie's brilliant.
Indiana Jones, perfect display of just fun, shameless killing. Of awful people.
You can always tell people that have talent. You don't have to have a lot of money to make talent.
You don't. It's been proven time and again, and someone's not taking note. They're just thinking we need it to be bigger and louder, and stupider. And it's like, no. It's kind of like the whole remake button. It's like, whoever is that keeps bringing that, stop doing it. My pal Mac Jackson has the Forever Adventure Time Network, and every time he's on the Never Gets Old podcast, he will always have a special just talking about, revive. Don't reboot, don't remake, revive.
No,
not everyone will be entertained, but eventually the best that whatever program has to offer is going to shine through.
And that's the hard thing, because every once in a while you'll get a reboot and you'll get Battlestar Galactica, and fans will stab each other over it. I mean, when people get into Trek and Wars, I just go Babylon 5 and run out of the room, because then they can
You're one of the guys who sabotage Stargate.
Speaking of Babylon 5, when they went to TNT, I can remember that when they went to TNT, and TNT throws, Davidsky a bunch of money, right? And says, okay, we're going to have season 6. I didn't write that. But then they came out with those TV movies, and they did the one about In the Beginning.
Yeah.
About the Earth Maribor, which I did a whole thing on recently.
Great stuff. Yeah.
Great stuff. Now, remember the line when they're talking about the Dilgar and all that, and the guy plays Sulanda, goes, oh, he has these great lines about arrogance and hubris all in one package. Just make sure that you're not stumbling around and wake the dragon. And the guy who played God, In the Beginning is this brilliant piece of Babylon 5, and you look at that and like, that's how prequels should be made. They made references to stuff that if you're a true fan of Babylon 5, you got. And you watch it like, my God. And then you get crap. And then you get, that's the funny thing about some of these things. It's like every once in a while, someone will do something, you'll have a trend, and something will come out of it, and you're like, my God, that's good. And then you'll get shit and over and over again.
Yeah, it always makes you wonder, did we spoil the creator first where they can't possibly conjure up a worthwhile idea, or are they sick of it, or was it always intended this way, but they didn't ask for anyone's opinion? I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm glad you opened the J. Michael Straczynski thing, because you will see some fans saying, I'm with him, I'm team, MJS, JMS, and then there's others who are like, oh, he's cynical, he never gets along with the TV producer, and it's like, oh, let's just help each other out. Just we can all agree and disagree. You can't expect a creator to like everything they make or always come up with a good, encounter. I mean, and yeah, it's a puzzle. It really is a puzzle trying to make it all work.
I mean, he worked on Captain Power, for God's sakes, okay?
Jeremiah and now Sensei. The dude is a sci-fi fan. I mean, the 80s Twilight Zone. The dude can do it all.
Yeah, you're right about that. He can do it. I would, and honestly, here's the thing about B5. And I think about, like, okay, for instance, we'll get a connection here.
No, so it's fine. I get where you're going with it, but
so B5 and Space Above and Beyond both have primitive CGI, right?
Yes.
There's something charming about it.
Just the Wing Commander look, because that's what everyone was using at that time, before it got its own movie.
Oh God, I'm gonna go vomit. Have you ever watched Spoonie's review of that? Spoonie One Knows. Have you ever watched this thing on Wing Commander? It's hilarious.
Please share me that link. I will look it up.
I think at one time, because I played, in fact, I had to install a sound blaster I got for Christmas to play the very first. I put speakers on my Packard Bell 1991 Windows 3.1, and I had Wing Commander on there. I got off disk and I could have CD-ROM, and I hooked in speakers and I installed the sound blaster so I could play that. And I remember later, Space Above and Beyond was on, and I could play a video game of it. I could play Wing Commander and I could play X-Wing, and I would get in, I'd be like, turn it on, like, let's get Jeet, and kind of stuff. And oh God, and that's the thing about that show. I will forever be in its debt to the things it gave me and the thoughts it gave me and some of the beauty that was in that show. And it didn't matter what was going on, but mainly what we've been talking about today in our conversation, to me,
this is as good as we're going to get, guys. This is the best episode about the subject. I don't care. Obviously I'm going to edit the hell out of it, but still,
right. I mean, like 3 hours of video here about Space Above Beyond.
Right. What the hell? We want the full 3-hour cut. Yeah. Release it. Yeah. But it is just interesting to just kind of, it's just like, we can only do just so many things in such an allotted amount of time. And then what I can only hope that there is a convention panel in the future. I want, like you say, to hit on your earlier point, I want there to be people making cosplay from this. I want there to be a space A and B day, at even the most private. It can be, we're both here in Texas. It can be the most private, again, comic book shop. Have it happen, have someone come out, have them pay said person, to do convention appearance, and just go for it. I'm sure we could even unite the cast on an unofficial Zoom, because I've had plenty of other podcaster pals who've done that with their own shows. And it wouldn't take much to sit down some of these cast guys. What do they have going on right now that they can't sit down?
Yeah.
And there would be an audience. There would totally be an audience for it. There's definitely an audience always getting into it who, again, are fans of the creator's other work. So, and it's something they're able to do. They're able to make all these people who we previously did not know become TV legends. So, I mean, there's a magic there. Let's figure it out. Let's work it.
That's the thing. I think you said there's magic, because I remember watching the show and the things that, of course, I remember space battles and the
GeoCities is how I knew about this damn show. Like, there was people covering it, people dedicated to the actors who, again, eventually you seek it out because you want to know more about it, and it comes up in a search engine. Like, who is this James Morrison? Who is this? All these other guys.
I've written what? I write about Space Above and Beyond a lot. It pops
Let's
up.
say you've written 500 articles, because you've written so much, and it's always hands-on. It's dynamite. It's great stuff.
I appreciate it. It's I'm sitting here in my dark room, with a couple of people occasionally that help me out, or
analyzing the themes, though. that takes work to actually sit down, study a scene, and say this is what they intended by this, or according to this commentary track, which they were so fortunate to allow as a special feature in the US. They say they're going for this. Here's what I get from this. That illustrates this other ugly chapter of history, because I think that's just it too. The show, like I say, has the perfect amount of social commentary, just like Battlestar, and that it's not mindless. Just like we had to remind people that, hey, Star Trek's not mindless either. Neither is X-Files. You might go for just the content. There's always going to be someone like that who watches X-Files just for the gory mystery or the romantic interplay between the leads. But the other ones who want more dense stuff will actually get something from it.
And you can't, and that's the thing about Space Above and Beyond. It exists in this realm that is so rare that it's like this dark military science fiction show that had so much balls, and it has such beautiful things in it, and so many references, and it came from a beautiful minds, beautiful writers, and beautiful actors that did it, and designers and everything, and it made the most of what it could do, and it was $1 million an episode show back in 1995, 1996. And when I was, I'll never forget. So there's that M95, M590 article that exists on Future Search. I wrote the backstory of that gun by Raking Leaves. It's one of these weird things that you do. You're thinking about an article and you're writing it. And I just, for some of this, I have to get all these thoughts that I've had since 1995, 1996.
You have to have them make sense, guys. We have to outline them. We have to retype and look for typos. It's not easy, even if it's just a few cents.
The gun, has a sensor that flips up. And I had hell trying to figure out what the thing was. It a scope or what was it behind the thing that flips up, the little HUD? And
why they introduced this film shot, why it's in the episode, what it means later on. It's a puzzle.
Crazy. And I had to get somebody online that had the hero prop, that had the lines on it. So I'm like, what is this thing underneath? He's like, okay. And that's, to me, if someone like me, that's as old as I am, saw this show when I was young, and it has still resonated.
They've done a hell of a job if that's the case. But not every show can do that, Some stuff we're revisiting, we're like, ooh, sign of the times, and then there's others like, well, I liked it as a kid, but I'm not a kid anymore, so I'm sorry. It doesn't have that appeal. But yeah. This is a show, much like any broadcast show, it's for adults, it's also for young adults. Teens can watch it for the most part, and it's just to introduce all this, and then it's so hard to face rejection, but it's also hard to just tell people, hey, we did our job, and it's still not many people were able to see it, but hopefully we can have so many geeky guys come out and embrace what they've grown up loving, what it actually means to them, instead of I watched it because it was on. It's like, no, that was not why you watched it. You watched it because it was compelling, and it made you start asking hard questions that you weren't ready to answer as a young adult.
It was, and I thought a lot about, and I had some special circumstances, the way the show spoke to me and how it spoke to me and the way it still resonates. But it's a testament, and it will always stand as a testament in our hearts. And I always. I'm hoping one day that it's one of those shows like Enterprise. Okay, show this cancel.
Heroes and Icons channel. Can you air this? Because you're airing rerun. You and Star TV are airing reruns of tons of TV classics, everything from The Closer to Profiler to The Pretender, all this other stuff that still has a giant fan base. If you guys want international geekdom, definitely listen to our Pretender episode. We had people from Italy and Germany chiming in, and it was already hectic because time zones and everything. But then when we finally got it, it was worth the wait. I hope. It was probably one of our higher rated episodes last season, just because there's a huge fan base. Yeah. There's people who were watching it who didn't realize they saw it. It's just like, I would always see the last 20 minutes. It's a great show. I just didn't know the name of it. And I'm like, now you know. It's out there.
My family came home, so they're going to be passing in front of the camera because I'm sitting in my kitchen because my home office is kind of a mess. And so they're going to be like walking by the camera. So,
it's all
they're
good.
shot. It's okay. So, I feel like, for every show at Space Above and Beyond where we have fans, I mean, I guess there are people that, are going to forget about, Teak War and the live action show from the 80s that was War of the Worlds, seasons 1 and 2.
Yes, good callback. Yeah.
God, yeah. Well, I have had to think about it because of so there are these things that represent, but I feel like so few of them were like Space Above and Beyond. And I'm grateful that we got to talk about this because there's my wife and camera.
I'm absolutely glad we could.
So I'm gonna, unfortunately,
I think this is a great way. Yeah, this is a good wrap up, and it's been great having you on here because we did some deep dives here, guys.
You'd be like, well, we could have William just on talk all the time about stuff like this. But I just want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about the show because most of it's me just posting an article and I let it marinate to the masses or whatever it does or it does nothing. And there are a couple people that will write videos and talk about it. But to actually hear the fan, it's been years. And to have the passion and the commitment to the show.
Oh, totally. I can't tell you how hard it is to get stuff like this done because, again, if there's anything that we repeat in society, we have people they want to do a podcast, but they often want to do it just for random like fan theories or to argue. They want it to be like Jerry Springer. And I've had to tell them, guys, if we're going to do a chat, we got to have people who are familiar with the material. It can't just be me talking to another guy who's never seen it. And we got to actually do a deep dive, like have some kind of narrative. Like, tonight we were talking the best moments. It's not easy to do, but at the same time, you were ready to talk about it. I already knew that going in and I was comfortable talking to you. You're too comfortable talking to me. It's a lot of work and you got to be ready to do it. And there's so many who just want blood on their hands. And it's like, it's not going to happen. And we're not here to piss people off. Why would I want to do that?
No. I want to talk about a show that was beautiful, that had beautiful haunting quality.
Hell, if we're talking about cheesy movies, why do I like this cheesy movie? Is it more than just the so bad as good? And if we're going to a quality program, why did I tune in every day with the clicker, with the VCR ready to record?
Yes. Why did I sit around waiting for my shift to get done at McDonald's, run home and like watch the freaking tape and be like, oh, and then kept those videotapes until I could get. And then
until it didn't play anymore, it was worn out, and you recorded over something else.
I'm never going to see the show again. And then you run out and get the one DVD set, and you get it, and then you're like, "Oh, there's B5 on there." But
everyone else is selling it back for $50, and you're like, "No, own it.
I will die with this.
Own it.
Family heirloom. I don't care what else. You can release your 50th cut. Of course, I do have a Blade Runner suitcase edition. That's I have one of those. I only asked for that for Christmas. I'm like, the only thing I want is my Blade Runner suitcase edition with all the 10 versions of it.
Yeah, there you go. All you need.
They're still the plastic, but it's
you can't have it all.
No, but
you can have most of it. You can have that giant piece of pie, if not the greatest hits.
One of these sweet days, I'm going to get myself one of the props. But I'm really glad that guy went on and someone still has love too because they goes those clips go on YouTube. That guy did the AI scaling. It looks better than I could ever imagine. I was impressed. I watched
1,000%, and just
beautiful.
Have it there as an option because Fox isn't going to remove it. They don't care, and
they don't care. You didn't do it. I mean, they're like, who cares? I mean, Fox is moved on.
They pulled the plug to begin with, so I'm sorry if we don't care if their feelings are hurt. If you want to make money, then be like Shout Factory, be like these Severin and all these other guys doing these Blu-ray exclusives. They're looking at what people are saying in Reddit sections, on forums, on YouTube. They want to see.
Beyond.
Exactly.
Give me something where
give us a book of the never filmed stuff, like transcribe the unmade scripts into a novel that makes coherent sense as a reader, and we'll shut up. Because that's the other thing. Right. Everyone often wants the geeks to shut up. It's like, then feed us.
If
you're trapped on an island waiting for something to happen, you're not going away anytime soon. Just saying.
Exactly. And I will wait for my Space Above and Beyond Blu-ray. Fox, you hear me? Wait. waiting, just sitting out here
I'm
waiting.
waiting. I'm waiting.
Yeah, it reminds me of Morrison said, "You're going to be home eating dogs at Mayberry. You'll be raising money for charity. And I'll be out here waiting for the next one." And I remember that line because that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wait. I have talked about the show, and I'll probably talk about it as long as Future War Stories is an entity. And I eventually want something eventually, the totality of it. But it seems like the journey that never ends. We'll never get an ending. I'm never going to figure out more about the Chigs. I'm never going to see more of the Toga, and I'm never going to see more some of the stuff that was.
We'll make it happen. We'll light up those fan fiction forums. We'll go to town.
There's somebody who wrote some really good stuff one day. I remember there was a guy who used to write fan fiction stuff for Space Above and Beyond way back in the day. It was good. It was really good.
It had to be, man, dude, because they embraced it pre-internet as it was being popularized, much like B5. It just came in at. So if there's anything that did happen to close this out, it came in at the time when fandom was more powerful and people actually wanted to continue stuff. You know?
Yeah, I mean, we got Serenity.
Yeah, it didn't come in when an audience accepted it, but it came in when people after the fact. I mean, there's a second ending for everything. If the original Star Trek, which wasn't a thing until it went into reruns, then it can happen. Much like you said earlier, people can make anything for any kind of budget. I've seen people make movies for $5,000 that look pretty good.
Yeah,
but there's other people who just don't use their time well. They add too many subplots, or they hire their friends who can't act worth a shit. So that's why their indie movie sucks. It was like, get your theater buddies, get a good cinematographer pal, pay him, $400 a day, and go to town. Write the best shit you can and do it. As Zoom has taught me, I can make my own audio drama, and I'm going to start doing that.
I would never have a voice in sci-fi, and unless this was here. I mean, I started this because I was writing a book and I couldn't find answers. And I was like, okay, well, I have the ability to research. That's what I do. And I've always liked military science fiction. There we go. I will say this. The power of the fans, I think the biggest thing to say that what fans can do is the fact the very first space shuttle, the OV-101, was named the Enterprise.
Exactly.
Because it's going to be called the America or something else. And we got it. In September of 76, they announced it's going to be the Enterprise. Because that's the power of people like us.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a